we need to tailor everything to women because once we crack the case on gender, then we can talk about these other things. I was out here in the streets telling other, siblings, our time will come. Just wait.
I don't think it's a bad strategy, but
But
it's not the best.
because I'm like, if they don't even know how to treat, their white sisters, so, I don't know how they're gonna take us.
Hey Mark, thank you so much for joining me. I'm actually so excited to have you here because we're talking about culture, we're talking about workplace culture and change, and like who could be better to talk about this with?
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me on your lovely podcast. And yes, those are some of my favorite topics.
Please introduce yourself and what you do for everybody who's going to be listening and watching this.
Of course. My name is Mark Ivan Serunjogi. Based in Berlin, where I've been for about a decade. I'm originally from Copenhagen. Grew up with my East African parents who were migrants. So I grew up in Copenhagen, very much part of the East African diaspora. Left Copenhagen for about 12 years ago. First went to New York before I came here to Berlin, and I've been working in the employer branding, DEI, and culture strategy space for about a decade now.
Yeah, that's how I met you, working in employer branding and culture change. Can you please explain what those things are for people who have no idea? Because I'll be honest with you, when I first met you and you were working in employee branding, I had no idea what it was.
Yeah, and it's a question that I get often. So actually, my background is in marketing, and I studied strategic communication. So I started out in marketing, and then I realized I want to do marketing, but for people, because I was really interested in specifically what was then called, what is DI now, but I was looking at how do we open up opportunities for more people like us, like myself, like how do we actually pass it forward once we've gotten into positions in corporations and companies. But I'm like, I'm a marketeer. I'm made to market things, to sell things, to connect with consumers. How do I do things more for quote unquote my people? And that's when I came across employer branding because I didn't know it myself either. And I was like, oh, this is just like marketing and branding, but for people and culture. So I look at it as culture being like a product. That's the product that we're trying to sell. We're selling an employee experience, and we want uh, users of that experience, candidates, professionals, to like the product enough to want to buy it, to join the company and say, like, you know what,
Ooh.
is that we want. Sometimes, however, a company may want a specific type of audience. Like we need a certain skill set, we need these talents, we need this behavior, we need this attitude for us to really pop and be the best that we can be and build the best products and services that we can. But something in their culture doesn't match with those people. So that's where the culture change aspect comes in of saying like, hey, we are trying to market to these people and saying like, hey, come work for us. But there's something about our product that is not matching with them. They're saying like, what you have is not what we want. So now we have to
Mm.
ask ourselves, do we want to pivot and look for other kind of people to connect with? Or do we want to create some kind of change, some kind of development in our culture so that we match better what they're looking for and it will make it easier for us to reach out to them and for them to join the company. So that's the connection between employer branding as the marketing piece of it. The employee experience is what we're selling. And then the culture change comes in when somehow there's a mismatch and we
Mm.
figure out how do we create an employee experience that those that we want also want.
That is such an incredible explanation. I completely get it, right?
Mhm.
And I want to know from you which companies or brands that you think have got a really great employee branding that many of us would know. And similarly, which organizations you think have done a really great job in culture change in order to get the best talent that's available that can help them, grow and be the best be the best that they can be in terms of their offering, their brand, and what they put out in the world.
Yeah, you ask a really, really good question. I tend to be on the cynical side. That is like, I always look at everybody and they're just critical, like this could be better, this could be better. But I think that what um, is really a testament to a strong employer brand are the brands that are really, really honest to the point that people know beforehand what they're getting once they join. And once they join, that lives up to their experience.
Mm,
A very classic example is, I think, Netflix that is very open about like, hey, we have a very high performance culture. You may join us and you may be great at Netflix for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but we don't expect people to be great at fit for us forever. And we are a stepping stone for people. You come, you join, you work hard for 2, 3 years, you do the best work of your career possibly, and then we might outgrow you or you might outgrow us.
mm.
But people come in knowing that from the beginning, and that means that the expectations are aligned. You don't come in and you're surprised that, oh my God, people are so ambitious here. They are asking me to always be at 100 or even deliver 110%, or that when that year comes and you get the feedback from your manager saying like, hey, we feel like if you're not going to live up to these and these expectations, we may not keep you for next year. You're not surprised by that conversation because you're like, you know what, I had good 3 years here, good 3 years here at Netflix, and that's what I knew when I signed on, and I've
I
become
love that.
yeah,
I do. I love that. And it reminds me actually a bit of Uber. Whilst I don't think that is definitely part of their like branding, employee branding. I don't think it's necessarily something that's upfront, but I do remember people would learn a lot at Uber very quickly because I think, they always said like 2 years at Uber is like 5 to 10 years somewhere else. And
yeah,
that's the truth because you learn so much is that you often outgrow as much as they outgrow you you outgrow that space and then people would they go off somewhere else make often making
you used to be at Uber, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So I can see the parallels there actually. I love that. And what about culture change? Do you have an example of a brand that you have either worked with or that has gone through a really great process of changing their culture to be able to have a great employee brand?
I think this one is more tricky because so much of the work happens internally. So
Mm.
you don't see much of that. And even outside of the brand is not usually visible because even with the clients that we work with in my work now, when it's internal work, it may not be to change the external employer brand. It's more to make sure that the inside is actually matching what is already on the
Okay.
outside, so
Yeah.
that when people say like, "Oh, you are that," they have less of the experience that people come in and say like, "Oh, you said you were this, but this is not what I'm experiencing." So we
Yeah.
actually need to, so we need to enhance the experience to actually match more of what we actually said up front. I will say from my personal experience. Working at Zalando. So Zalando is a company that I worked at twice.
Mm.
Uh, I worked there initially as a digital marketeer, and then I left to go into employer branding at another company. Actually, I Get Your Guide, where we worked together, and
Hmm.
then I was able to rejoin later on doing employer branding at Zalando. And part of me choosing to accept another role in the company after having been gone a couple of years was that I saw the changes in their culture, and
Oh,
I saw
wow.
and I saw that there was more conversations around diversity and inclusion topics, and I saw that the small seeds that were placed while I was originally there about diversity and inclusion and getting an officer to actually own the topic and how that had grown into a full-fledged department to see how that had been interwoven into um, brand campaigns, not only just employer branding, but actually
Hmm.
product brand as well, that they had a very 360 approach to um, DI. But because I had been on the inside, I could see the evolution. I knew what the internal conversations had
Mm.
before and how some campaigns had been seen as edgy because they kind of dabbled a little bit on it.
Yeah.
They want to commit to it. To then see years later them saying it loud with their chest, at least externally, like this is what we stand for, this is what we're doing. We want to be a brand where everybody feels comfortable to shop and can see themselves in our products. Um, that was a personal experience for me, saying like, oh, things can actually change. They may not happen as fast as you think, or as visibly as you think. But actually, if you, look away for a bit and then you look back, you're like, oh, you're not the same anymore.
Yeah, I actually think Zalando is a very good example of a brand that has really embedded DEI into so much of their infrastructure.
Yes.
And I was thinking actually, I may be wrong, but I actually think Google feels like a quite a different organization now than maybe 10 years ago, when they had lots of problems with gender equality and representation of women. And I think, when you look at just at their product marketing, their product marketing is very inclusion focused, and as well as the fact that the workforce feels quite different to what it was like when it was very white techie bro 10-15 years ago, is that they have, for me it looks like they've made this culture change, because they are a brand that everybody uses and they've recognized that. So for me, I don't know if they've done that, but it feels like it's possible that they have.
And that's where my big question mark comes in, because when we deal with these very big corporations and global corporations, then when we talk about something like culture, like what is actually Google's culture? And where is that where is that defined when you have offices all over the world,
Mm.
people that are working on so many different levels of the organization. They have so many different products. So we have an idea of what Google the brand is, but what is the essence of working at Google when we already know that so much of cultures depends on who we are around, who is the immediate
Yeah.
team, who is the immediate manager, where is that team located, who are they interacting with, and what are the seniority levels as well when you have such a big organization. So I think a company like Google is also interesting, and an interesting example of how much of the employer brand also ends up being what we are projecting onto it, because it's
Mm.
multifaceted. Google means so many things to so many different people, both positive, negative. We even have conversations like, are they having too much of monopoly on the internet, right? Are
Yeah.
they, are they the big evil? Are they
Hmm.
taking over everybody and taking our jobs with the development of AI tools and technology? There was a controversy because they also fired a bunch of women who were warning about the dangers of AI technology as well. So with a brand that is so big and so vast, it also means that a lot of its meaning is not in the brand's control. It's actually in the viewer's control of like,
Yeah.
what are we putting into it? Are we seeing it as the enemy, as the big bad? Or are we seeing it as, this is my bucket list company. Like I will not have a good career unless I've had a position there because I need it on my resume.
That is such a valuable question, because I think the same about things like Meta
Hmm.
and also Amazon.
Exactly.
We have to ask these questions because, this came up today actually as a topic somewhere else, is that we used to look at things far more binary, right? These things, something was good, something was bad. And now, almost in everything, there's so much nuance. Is that in things that do good can also do bad. Things that do
Yes.
bad can also do good. And you have to pick what fits your values the most, and how, like you said, how you see it. What's the projection that you see? It's
Exactly.
it's such
Exactly.
a complex question, but one that's incredibly important to have as we move into much more of a even more digital than we currently are. Understanding the impact of AI, the value of it, but also the danger that it can cause us. Like, I think just looking at the job market this year, many people that I've spoken to, understanding their challenges in the job market or as a freelancer is because of the introduction of AI. Because of the introduction of AI has impacted, people's prospects, their livelihoods, etc. But how long will that go on for? We don't know.
The bigger threat that I'm seeing is less about the AI tools itself, but how people are reacting to it. Because I see this as an evolution of technology. Like technology has always been evolving, and at every turn of a big thing, people have been worried. It's been doomsday. Like when we're going to be out of work, the internet is going to steal people's work, right? the record player was about to like kill radio, and TV was going to kill radio, and then Netflix is going to kill TV. Like there's always evolution.
Hmm.
And I think that's where we are right now. We're adapting to like how do we work with technology at the state that it's in. And maybe it's one of the areas where I am naive. I believe that we will still, at least in the foreseeable future, need people to manage that technology.
Absolutely. I'm the same as you. I absolutely believe in that because like you, I feel like it's definitely it's meant to be an enhancement of what we currently have. It's the same with everything that was ever launched. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when they launched mini discs. Do you
Oh,
remember this?
not the minute.
And they were like, mini discs are gonna take over. The
Yeah,
CD is dead. Mini disc lasted. It literally was like a dead rock. You
what,
know, they
what,
even
2 or 3 years? Like,
if
if,
if
yeah,
that would be nice. I think it lasted a year. I remember they even released albums on a mini disc.
yes,
You know, I remember there was like a Mariah Carey album on a mini disc, and it was more expensive than the CD.
right,
And I remember thinking, this is ludicrous. And I couldn't have been the only one because it didn't work like that. You know, they, to an extent, technology has to market itself to us,
exactly,
right? As the end user. So it has to sell itself as the solution to our greatest problems
yes,
rather than being an enhancement to our lives, which is basically what we've seen it do time and time and time again. It just enhances our lives, makes some things simpler, but also can make other things more complex. And
yeah,
so for me, that's AI. I think it's a really great tool to take away the things, some of the mundane things, you know, some of the simpler things. Sometimes like simple things take the longest amount of time, like
right,
planning, right? Like I think it's a great tool if you want to plan something, like plan a calendar. Great.
mhm,
That takes a lot of time, but it's also quite a boring task to do. But do I think it should take away creativity? Do I think it's good at creativity? No.
no, no,
I think that's where it falls short. It doesn't mean that it may not get better, and it also doesn't mean that it doesn't help you be more creative or enhance your creative ideas and your propositions. Sure, yeah. Like I think we've just got to be realistic. Like there's this idea that it's all or nothing all the time. And like,
exactly, exactly.
really, is that where we are? I feel like we should know better than that now.
Exactly. And that's where I feel like people, where I'm just like, people relax. When people are like, what's your take on AI? I'm just like, relax and let's see what happens.
Like, relax. I'm just going to ask it a couple of questions here and there, you know, and if it gets it right and I like it, great. If it doesn't, I move on.
Exactly.
To me, it's like a slightly better version of Google sometimes. And sometimes Google is better than the AI. It just depends on what I'm asking it, how I'm prompting, you
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. And building it into products that we're already using. I mean, again, this is an evolution of how we have already been using big data sets, machine learning, personalization, algorithms into work to make sure that things are much more either customized to the
Hmm.
consumer or easier for the consumer to get to the results that they want and need. So it's not that, we woke up one day and it's like, the machines are taking over.
Personally, if the machines are going to take over, I'd like them to do some of the domestic tasks.
That part, very much
Like,
that
you
part.
know, because I'm like, if we're going to get AI, can you guys figure out someone who can clean the house
Exactly,
and can empty the dishwasher and can make the clothes self-cleaning? Like all
exactly.
of those things I would be down for.
Yeah.
The other things I think human beings are great at already, you know, like
And that's also the
let's
thing, and that's also the thing that is, I think, sad. And the scary part, again, it's people that scare me because even the way that technology has enhanced, I want to hear much more case studies of like how AI and advanced machine learning or, all these tools are helping us as human beings, helping us live better lives, be healthier, close equality gaps and equity gaps throughout the world. How are we using it to, you know, be better when it comes to, Black women in healthcare? And that is like a talk that I saw, I think it was last year with a startup founder that said like, oh, she started getting into her work thanks to AI because now they were able to crank such a big data set so they could see patterns of how certain, in terms of like reproductive health, how it affected specifically Black women based on the data that they have, because now they had the technology to actually, decipher that and say like, oh, this is
Mhm.
actually a concern we need to look into. These are the kind of case studies that I want to hear
These are the
more.
kind of things that we want to see. And I think that's especially like prevalent for me when we have conversations about um, gaps when it comes to people that have been, like, I say strategically marginalized, right?
Mm,
So women, because we're not a minority, women
yeah.
are not a minority. We have been strategically marginalized, right? The same that for people who are black and brown and essentially non-white people,
Yeah.
disabled people, people from the queer community, etc. Like, now companies have this tool that could really help them understand how to better build environments, cultures, infrastructures, making sure that all of this nuance and intersectionality can be included,
Mm,
right? Because a lot of the time people still ask questions like, how is this still relevant? Or why is the DEI an important part of this conversation? I don't see how DEI is relevant to
mm,
XYZ. Last week, I had a post that went pretty much not viral, but did well for LinkedIn, which is
got
not
attention.
easy to do,
Yeah.
right? With the new algorithm, talking about the return to office mandate and how that is connected to DEI, and there's a lot of old white guys, not so old, middle aged, probably not that much older than me, asking how is this connected? I don't understand how the return to office mandate is connected to disability or gender equality, etc. And like, I'm thinking to myself, like, rather than you asking me that question, you could take those same words you've typed, copy them, paste them, put them in ChatGPT, and you'll
And get
get an absolutely beautiful answer that you'll understand.
that part very much.
Like, you're busy asking me, waiting for a response from me when you could get that in five seconds.
That is going to be my retort to everything at this point. It's like, instead of asking us, go to ChatGPT and ask, why do these people care about this? You'll get a beautiful answer.
You'll get a beautiful answer that hasn't come from me that you'll understand. And
Yeah.
then from there, you could then ask it, like, why should I care? Or how
Yeah.
could I be part of this? Or if I'm really not interested, how can I avoid these kinds of conversations? It will give you all the things that you need to know. You
I
don't need to ask us anymore.
never thought of it that way, but this is going to be my answer to everything from now on.
Like, come on. Like, when I'm thinking about it, right? Because I really want to talk about the Black experience at work,
Yes.
because this is something that is so unique and is normally protected, right? We talk
Mm,
about it in these protected, safe spaces.
mm,
And I say this because I've done so many listening sessions where companies hire me to listen to Black employees. This was really popular during hashtag Black Lives Matter 2020 Black Square Summer, right?
rest in peace.
It was really popular.
Yeah.
But something something that always um not bothered me, but I was always very aware of the fact that the same themes, no matter where, no matter which industry, no matter how many Black people, how many few Black people, didn't matter so much the gender, the same things pretty much came up time and time and time again.
Mm,
And at this point now, I just want to use the Black experience as an example because
mm,
that's something that we can both relate to, right? But
absolutely.
at this point now, organizations should be at a point where they should be using things like AI, like consultants, like the information that is out there to better build companies and organizations and brands that integrate Black employees and Black consumers much better than they already have. The information
Mm,
is out there
mm,
in abundance, right?
yes.
You
Yeah.
can even ask Claude ChatGPT to help you write a framework on how to better do that.
Yeah.
But for those that have not yet done that, I wanted to talk about the the specific things around the Black experience at work that most of the time don't come out of our safe rooms, right? Because
Yeah.
to me, it makes sense that we talk about them in these safe spaces. And the work that I have done and do, I take this information in this data and I present it back to the clients. But also, I think people should know how different our experience is and the things are that we need to have an opportunity to thrive in these environments, because we are entitled to these environments just like everybody else. This is something I always talk to people about, because they go, yeah, but it's not our company, or it's not our country, it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. And it's like, you're doing too much. You are entitled to thrive just like everybody else.
Yeah. And I think even when you say that, and there are a couple of times that we've talked about it before, I've always found it very powerful that you are able to not only say that, but believe that and have that come into the space with that energy. And having worked in the same building with you, you definitely come in with that energy. And I think for me, it took a bit of time to get there. In some cases, I feel like I'm still working on it because I very much grew up with parents that reminded me often that this is not your country, this is not your company. You better do as you're told because we came here to work. So what you need to do is what? Is to go to work and do as you're told. And they didn't understand the frustration with wanting to feel not only belonging, but being acknowledged that I do belong. Because I felt like I do belong until I'm being othered. And they were like, well, why are you so bothered? Because you are othered.
Mm.
Don't worry so much about it. And so I think that that is a challenge that we very much in Black spaces talk about and are at different stages with, and also depending on like how old we are, how senior we are in our profession, and also where I think where we come from and like what kind of like baggage our parents have given us. Because I
Yes.
definitely think that that thing of like my parents not giving me space to vent about work because they're like, it's not your company, so why are you complaining? It had an impact on me very early on in my career. Like, you know what? Well, I guess I should just be quiet and fall in line and see where that will take me. And unfortunately, in many cases, it also, that's what I got rewarded for,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, Mark is a team player. Mark does what he's told to do. Mark sets up good reports because he doesn't talk back and he doesn't question things. So here you go, advancement, advancement. You're like, oh, okay, so that's how you do it. That's how you get ahead until you, at then some point, become senior enough that you're like, okay, now I don't need to play the game at that level anymore. So now
Hmm.
I'll dare to be more vocal. Now I'll dare to speak my mind a bit more, but it still comes with the concern that if I don't get the right amount of validation, acknowledgement,
Yeah.
then I could be let go at any point. I could be discarded at any point. And not only will I personally be embarrassed, a disgrace, be ashamed, I will have been let down my entire people because I'm not only representing me as myself, I'm also representing how these other people who are not black perceive blackness through me.
Exactly. And I really want to talk about what you said when you spoke about your experience with your parents. And I think this is for me the biggest difference that I've noticed with the Black experience, and then the differences of the Black experience depending on your background and your upbringing. So
Mm,
I am probably one of the first, like, second generation of, like, black British with black British parents,
right,
right? A lot of
right.
people my generation actually will have parents who were not born in the UK.
Oh yeah, I have
And
many
so what
British cousins.
yeah?
I have many British cousins, so I know.
So the majority will have an experience where you put your head down, you're an immigrant,
Mhm,
you shut up, you put up, and don't ask for too much. This is not your country. It's a
mhm,
very different position when you're brought up by British parents who went to
mhm.
school, who also believe they're entitled. So your entitlement goes up. And I noticed the difference between me and people who don't have that same upbringing, because
Yeah,
you feel like you belong somewhere else, but I feel like I belong here.
Absolutely.
So because I feel like I belong here, I believe I'm entitled to just as much as everybody else. And so whilst that may be not necessarily that common for my age group, obviously it's more common now, and I think that that's the difference in what we're seeing, is that the companies have not caught up with the fact that you've got black, brown, and any other marginalized groups of people that were born, schooled, raised in this country and feel entitled to everything just as like everybody else, but there's still a mismatch in culturally how you support them. And I think one of those things is that, like you said, black talent or Asian talent are expected to just work and not complain and not ask for anything more,
Yeah,
and when they ask for something more, you're asking for too much.
absolutely. I mean, you're asking for too much. You're asking for special treatment. And if you see, I think that, yeah, we call it a backlash from when we got to kind of like level up on the let's say the DI conversation after 2020, because I remember even myself when I started doing more diversity and inclusion work in the late 2010s, I had the mindset, you know what? We need to tailor everything to women because once we crack the case on gender, then we can talk about these other things. I was out here in the streets telling other, siblings, our time will come. Just wait.
I don't think it's a I don't think it's a bad strategy, but
But
it's not the best.
because I'm like, if they don't even know how to treat, their white sisters, so, I don't know how they're gonna take us.
I mean,
So when 2020 happened, it was like, unfortunately, on the back of such tragedy and disparity, it was like a momentum. It was like a window. It's like, oh, this is our time to put race on the table in a
yes.
way that is cannot be dismissed. You
Like,
know,
I think we just all had a huge sigh. We were like, oh, we've been carrying this for so long.
right?
Thank God.
We were more like, okay, yeah, we're going to talk about women, and we also going to talk about race. So intersectionality. Have you heard of it? So, and that was like an opening for us. And now I think because people really haven't grasped that fully, especially in Europe, because I think in Europe there's so much of a conversation of like, is this a US only conversation or not? Does
Hmm.
this apply to us? Because they hadn't caught up. They hadn't this idea that how are you asking me if this is a European topic as I'm sitting here with you as a Black European in my 30s,
Yeah.
European born and raised, and now I have to clarify how this is a part of my life and my daily experiences, but also because I've also been conditioned not to talk with you about it because we already know, well, they don't get it. So we don't talk about it with them. We talk about it with ourselves. And again, with this mindset of like, well, we're here to do work. We don't complain to them. We complain amongst ourselves.
Amongst ourselves.
And now we're seeing that backlash. They're like, they don't get it. They're like, why are these people now asking for so much? Why are they being so loud? Is this the Gen Zs? Have the Gen Zs arrived? And it's like, no,
Everybody's woke.
exactly. And it's like, first of all, I'm a proud millennial, and I'm proud to soon be 40 as well. But it's like, it's not that it's necessarily a generational war as much as I think that even people that are younger are being much vocal about what I think us millennials also wanted, but didn't know how to be vocal about.
Yeah. There
And
wasn't enough of us.
it wasn't enough.
We were up against Gen X, boomers, God knows who else. Like, we were outnumbered. So we had to play the long game, right? And then when Gen Z came in, we were like, oh, okay. Now we go.
Now we go, right? And even as you said, like there's also that generational thing of looking at the history of global movement. So if you are second generation, like even me being first generation, I didn't feel like there's a lot of first generation people around.
Mm.
So I'm even seeing Black European as being shaped in real time
Yes.
with like
I love it.
being actively a part of figuring out. wait, who are we? Which way do we go? Like, how do we define this thing that is us, that it hasn't been defined before us? Because most of our older generations came here as migrants, but also have a mindset of and relationship with the land as migrants. They still talk about home that is somewhere
Mhm.
else. Versus when I talk about going home, I'm talking about going to Copenhagen. And
I'm
then
talking about London.
exactly, right? And then I go home and my mom talking about her home, which is somewhere else, which is in Kampala in Uganda. So it's like we have different ways of thinking about home, and therefore the entitlement of like, well, but that entitlement of claiming and owning Copenhagen as my hometown, that took work as well. That wasn't just a
Mhm.
given. So of course, if I were to have kids, my kids are going to grow up feeling like, oh, this is all ours. And I feel like that now, but that was a journey for me to get to.
Yeah, and I think that that is personally, I have really embraced being a Black European. I didn't really know when I was younger that that's what I was. That doesn't like diminish my ancestry, which is Jamaican, right? Which to
Right.
me is really important. I really feel that ancestry and I really embody it. But I know that me personally, I'm a Black European and I feel comfortable in that because there's so many more of us and that we get to have this really amazing experience of hybrid cultures,
Yeah,
right? Where we get to mix these two worlds and bring them together and bring
yeah,
out something new. And I think we see that with like music and
yeah.
fashion and art, which is a mixture of all of these worlds that make us who we are.
Exactly. And I think that even with the internet, and maybe we can definitely credit Gen Z for this, what I love even more is that we've gone from like the diaspora wars to more of this diaspora unity and the cross-pollination between, you know, African and Caribbean influences. And then of course we always
Absolutely.
have like the Black US culture dominating over us, but it's much more mixed in with all the other parts of the Black diaspora as well. And where we acknowledge like, okay, you can't be Black and Italian, and you can be, Caribbean and French, or half Swedish and half Nigerian. Like all of this exists at the same
Like
time.
it's all possible now. And I think that that is something that we're acknowledging ourselves and also we need like organizations to also understand and acknowledge. Like I think one of the things that holds us back the most is that organizations don't understand Black people. They don't get it.
But one thing that I will add to that is that, but and I know that they need to, but the question is, but do they need to? And a lot of organizations don't understand because they feel like they don't need to, because at the end of the day, they want to make money. And that's where some, not to get all woke, but but that's where we have the intersection with capitalism,
True.
right? Right? Like if a main organization or company's goal is to make money, how do we connect their need and their desire with
Hmm.
our needs and desires, which is to be, seen, recognized, acknowledged, but also paid fairly. Uh,
I agree, but then I have to ask you the main thing about business is people. We don't know business exists without human beings. They
yeah,
don't. Capitalism doesn't exist without human beings.
I
Money doesn't.
I
We
agree, but
the
they don't see it like that.
the entire thing hangs on humans, right? That's the first part. It's essential.
I'm telling you, I feel like actually at the core of what I do with my, yeah, as we talked about at the beginning, there's all these culture changes, et cetera, et cetera. But I think at the core of what I do, my job, is to remind business leaders, founders, that at the end of the day, this is about people. You can say that people are your biggest assets, but if you're not paying them as such, you're actually not walking the talk. You say that you need to do A, B, and C, but people are the ones that do it. So if you want to have the best product, why aren't you making sure that you are treating your people the best so that they can show up and do their best to build the best product and make you the most money possible? Like even if you have the most cynical, greediest, capitalistic business person, you not being people first and people focused in your strategy doesn't make business sense. It does.
It doesn't make business sense. So I understand why people will say, well, why does a company need to get to know and understand Black people, right? On one hand, I say I understand the argument, and on the other hand, I say, but Black culture is one of the biggest commodities in the entire world, right? A lot of organizations use, I'd say most actually, use some form of Black culture to connect with the general population. You see it all
Oh,
over social media. Sometimes it's more so much you forget that it came from Black culture in the first place, right? So you,
absolutely.
so we're relying on Black culture to sell things, right? But you're not relying on Black people internally to be able to be part of that process, right?
And
To me, that
and that's where the equitable part comes in, like the missing equitable part of
there's a
giving.
missing equitable part in that process. And also on the other side of that is the same way organizations have to understand women. They
Mm,
still don't. They have to understand women. They have to understand how to build organizations that support women so women can thrive in the environments. In fact, it is a fact. There are studies, so many studies to say that organizations with more women in senior leadership, with more women on boards, with better equality and equity amongst women perform better, right?
yeah.
So we already know that. So organizations have to adapt to things that women need. Women and men are different. We can do the same, but we are different. We need different things.
And I would even say it broader in the sense of like, yes, we are different also based on our identities, but generally people are different. Like we are just different
People, there you go.
as
So the
individuals. And
people are different.
and that's what comes back to my main crux is that I see that a lot of organizations and companies just, which is again the paradox, right? Because it's made up of people, but then at the end of the day, they don't understand people. They don't understand how to connect with people. They don't understand how to lead people. They don't understand how to create services and products that serve people, but they themselves are people. And that's where things become systemic. That's where we talk about the institutionalized, where it's like, though we are all people, it's like we have this entity that takes over and now all of a sudden we can't think, do, or act for ourselves and think about like, oh, how would I feel if that was me as a person versus
Mhm.
that, oh, I'm here to represent the company. No, who's the company? It's us, it's people. And I think that that is the biggest disconnect. And that is at the core of my job is like, I'm trying to reconnect us with that human element of saying like, hey, you can't just say your company is A, B, and C, throw it up in the air, then have people join and give them a shitty experience. You have to connect with the humanness of if you are hiring someone, you are now, you have their livelihood in your hands. You have their well-being in your hands. You have how much time they have for their families. You have also their family experience
Yes.
in your hands. And how are you ensuring that you are doing your absolute best for so that they can have the best experience, but also so that they can build you, the best product and service because it is a transaction. We
It's
are
a
in a society.
transaction.
It's a transaction.
But the transaction only works well when both parties get what they need
Exactly.
and what they ask for. You know, it's a negotiation, and that's I think that for me that's what's missing is that the negotiation part is is very different when you're coming from a marginalized group
Yeah.
than when you're coming from a majority group. Is that they're not willing to negotiate and meet your needs in the same way because they're
Yeah.
unable to adapt to them, which leads me back to the fact that they don't understand certain needs from certain groups, which
And
is
it,
what they need to do in order to be able to have the success that they're really looking for.
yes, but we are fighting with the ignorance because they don't believe that they need to know. So that's the thing. The work is about how to make them understand that, oh,
Hmm.
you need to understand that this is something you need to understand. Like it's even like double
Exactly.
to remove
We
it.
have to get them to that
They
point
need they
first.
get to like, oh, there's so much here that I don't understand, but I need to understand. Okay, now I can make the choice to then dive into these topics. But
Yeah.
even getting to the point of like, do you want to have a conversation about the things that you don't fully understand, or do you want to talk about the root causes to the issues you're seeing here and that they're not
Mhm.
the ones you think they are? That's already
Yeah.
the first tough conversation.
Oh God, you know what? We could talk about this forever. I have so many examples, and I'm sure you do too. But I just wanted to end on what would you recommend an organization to focus on in order to be able to build a culture that's ready for the future?
Build a culture that is ready for the future. Oh, that's both a big one. I want to give a big answer, but I'll try to keep it short and simple. Um, right as we just talked about, I think it is really centering people concretely. So actually, listening to people. If you have any kind of processes or structures where you get your feedback from people, where you were able to give engagement surveys, don't just ask questions for the sake of asking questions. Build full plans of like, how are you going to take that feedback? How are you going to turn that into projects that essentially are small change management projects? And how are you going
Mm,
to bring those to life and set up targets and set up KPIs where you can measure your progress on this before you, and then present it back to people before you go back and ask them the same questions. I cannot tell you how many times we get asked questions in surveys from companies say like, we want your feedback so that we can improve the experience. You answer questions, nothing happens.
mm,
And then they come back and say like, not only do we want you to answer these general questions of like how to, you know, improve the employee experience. Now we also want to run DEI surveys where we want you to be so vulnerable. You're going to give us your personal data of how you identify both in terms of like race, religion, sexuality, disability, et cetera, so that we can improve the work experience. But you've already asked all these questions beforehand, basic questions. Nothing has been improved. Now you want me to volunteer all of these sensitive information and on top of that, enhance and hope that things will get better. But you have not yet given me any proof in my time
mm,
here that you're able to do any kind of improvements in this organization. And that's usually the conversation that I start to have with with people that I work with or companies that I work with, that they say like, oh, we need to get more DI data. It's like, but what's the state of your current people data and what have you done with it? Because
mm,
if you are not able to, again, even for white men, cisgendered, heterosexual, able-bodied are also different. If you have a team full of men, white men, let's say that, and you are not able to create a great work experience and a safe environment for them, how is that going to change when you add a woman to the mix? How is that going to change when you add a person of color to the mix? How is that going to change by you adding a black woman to this team? So you're telling me that if you're not able to listen to, react, and shape work experiences and create great work experiences for your team of only men,
mm.
adding diversity to the mix is not going to make that easier, better. It's actually, on the contrary, going to make that harder because you already haven't managed the art of managing differences, the art of managing culture change, the art of managing enhancement of employee satisfaction and well-being, you know. So those are the
Oh,
basic skills we
Mark,
need.
that's a word. Honestly, that is a word. I that is something I think people miss out on so much, and that is the bare basics. Quite frankly, it's what you're saying is they're just being too ambitious, and they need to focus on what they have and actually deliver on that.
Deliver. And I think that, you know, people being ambitious or again, people have good intentions and
Mm.
people react to this like, hey, everybody's talking about this DI thing. I guess we got to get on board. And I asked ChatGPT and ChatGPT said I should run a DI survey. So I want to do that. But then you go back and say like, yes, good intentions are great, but at the first we should remember the one principal rule, which is harm reduction. Do not bring more people into more harm. And
Mm.
oftentimes when we hear people saying we're focusing on DI, we want to add more women to the team. We want to hire 20% people of color. But to what team? To what environment? Under which conditions?
Oh, you're killing me.
You know, but it's like we're already out here, you know, dealing with what we're dealing with to survive. Now you want to add me to a toxic team too, just so that you can get your DI numbers up? No,
You know,
man.
you know what you know what they say in England, and I think this is the perfect saying. Don't go from the chip pan in straight into the fire. You don't want
Yeah.
to get from one hot place into an even hotter place.
No. No.
Like, it's enough. Just deal with what you have and
Yeah.
go from there.
Yeah.
Mark,
Here's,
thank
I'm
you so much.
Thank you so much for having me again. We could be talking for
It has been
forever.
an absolute pleasure. I knew we would have so much fun. We can definitely do it again next year. Maybe next time we talk about AI.
Oh, let's see where we are in a year. Maybe we're all gone. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.